but we can go ahead and begin. Again, my name is Nick Rivera. I lead our account team here in the Bay Area, and we will again be sending this out as a recording. So let's go ahead and jump in. Excited to walk you guys through a demo day of automating your team's document approval processes with Pipefy. And we'll go ahead and kick off. So what is Pipefy? So Pipefy, we'll go through a quick run through of who we are, what we typically solve for, common scenarios that our customers face, a high level overview and visualization of how the thing works. And then we'll jump into a demo showcasing 2 quick sessions and scenarios where we'll run through a more sales ops, as you can kind of see on the right, CPQ approval process, approval being a heavy theme in this session, request management as well for going through the contracting part of procuring software or going through the contracting phase in Salesforce of actually reviewing documentation and pushing a deal to close or procuring new software within an organization. Again, feel free to collect questions, share them in the chat, send them to us after we do today's webinar. Happy to help answer those questions as well. Let's kick this off. So what is Pipefy? What the heck is it? So if Pipefy had a bumper sticker, or if it had some sort of quick quip about who we are and what is it that it does for our business, it would say something to the effect of, we are a low, no code process or business process automation or process orchestration platform, all somewhat similar in meaning. But what that effectively means for our customers is we're trying to give power back to the business user to determine which workflows make the most sense for our organization, allow the business user, say in this case, sales ops or fin ops or legal ops, the ability to determine what types of workflows are we building. And scenario wise, is it for like a deal desk approval? Who needs to be notified? How do we, and which systems do we update internally as we push things through approval? And as a sort of spoiler alert, what we're going to be doing is spending a little bit of time in Salesforce. And so in that scenario, we're updating Salesforce. We're starting there, we're ending there. And we're also managing documentation throughout that process. So again, if it had a bumper sticker, it would say something to the effect that we are a low, no code business process orchestration platform. That's what Pipefy would do. So here's the thing. So the typical challenge that we're solving for and the common things we run into have a very sort of common broad denominator underneath that, which is this idea and this concept that we're coining the long tail problem, which is historically, your organization has multiple, call it expensive, important, indivorceable things that are systems of record within your organization, right? We have Salesforce, we have our HRIS system, we have like a Zendesk, we have systems that do specific pointed things like Docusign, all of which will be making some cameos, Salesforce, Zendesk, and Docusign in today's session. But we have no real way to connect these systems. So do that and then do that at scale. So now we have tens of hundreds of employees constantly doing activity across these systems. It makes sense that we have email. It makes sense that we have Slack. Now we can make the most of those tools and tie up that unstructured work in Pipefy, right? Now, one quick interesting thing, and the very obvious thing that happens, is we're slowing productivity. We cannot track an email as hard as we try, right? We can't really prioritize or measure the SLA of a Slack or an email, right? But what was interesting, I'm gonna call it Okta here, is they actually did a study from this year, from earlier this year, from, we'll call it a remote 2020, on the number of applications your organization, my organization typically have within their application portfolio, right? This is an awesome study. It's Okta. If you literally Google Okta businesses at work, you'll find it. Now, what's interesting is that over the last 4 years, even through, call it a remote 2020, the growth of the applications within an organization has grown steadily of about 22% over 4 years. And on average, your organization probably has in the neighborhood of 88 applications within its application portfolio. That means that number one is going to grow. And two, that means your employees that you onboard are not only, of course, part of a process, all of us are part of some sort of process or workflow. We have more applications that need updating as we go ahead and do the work in front of us as part of our day-to-day job, right? So we have more applications within our portfolio. Now, what's interesting, and I would encourage you all to Google this as well, is Pipefy's integration stack. And so we recognize that. And again, part of the value problem, part of the thing that we want to do for our customers is make the most of your current investment in your people and make the most of your current investments in the software platforms that we have within your organization. So we have over 500 applications and integration points that we have. We have a lot that are fairly common. Again, I think for Cameo purposes, we're going to focus on Docusign, Zendesk, and Salesforce, but definitely feel free to Google this. And we have a lot of integrations in which we plug into, and that's the long tail problem. Now, what we're going to be solving for today and what we're going to be focusing on today, because that problem does manifest itself across a multitude of departments, is we're going to be actually focusing on approvals, of course, and we're also going to be focusing on the scenarios that maybe your FinOps, Sales Ops, maybe Customer Ops will go through for actually sending in something for approval, and then going through the close and contracting process through procurement, whether that's an actual procurement request or whether that's, hey, VP, I need to close this deal, I need to push it through an approval funnel. We're going to focus on those two things. Inevitably, those also touch other processes. Again, that's a follow-up. We can also touch on those as well. Now, in the purple, so one of the more common problems that we see as part of like education around what is Pipefy and what are we seeing in the market, thematically, approvals. Thematically, we're looking at SLAs. How do we measure what we have in flight that is otherwise unstructured and untracked within our organization? And in purple, although approval is very heavy within this theme, specifically, we have things flying through deal desk from our sales team. we have a configured Salesforce instance that needs field updates to occur that is otherwise manually adjusted by our reps, somehow haphazardly coordinated between our Salesforce admin, Sales Ops, and FinOps, not to their fault, but it's a huge beast to maintain. And then we also have documents that are just like flying across deal desk, trying to get approved, redlined. Hey, I need ITSec or InfoSec to review this. I need legal. You guys need to approve and redline this document. All of these things are happening in this whirlwind of process. Now, kind of glued and stitched up in an unstructured and unformatted way of getting about closing work. So in the middle here, yeah, it's kind of wordy, but the biggest thing is we know there's a lot of things we can't measure. We know there's SLAs for approvals we simply can't hold people accountable to, and we're not standardizing behavior of what it is that we need to do for our business. That goes across a multitude of departments. What we'll focus on today is primarily that Sales Ops and Sales Ops and internal use case for deal desk, right? So this, if we were to hang our hat on one slide, it would be this. This does a really good job of highlighting where work begins. What the heck do we do with that work when it flows into Pipefy in the middle? Again, your work in this workflow example will come from Salesforce. It'll also flow into Zendesk. It can come from a portal that we design for self-service or formalize in the intake funnel, right? We can apply automation rules. We can hook it into Docusign. And the endpoint from the origination that it came from, so if the work came from Salesforce, we can also just update that Salesforce field. We can make changes to the stage in Salesforce. We can make updates to the Zendesk ticket or the internal ticketing system that we have. So we'll keep coming back to this slide as a reference point for what we'll show today in the demo. So again, feel free to compile questions. We'll return back to the slide in just a second. But let's begin. Let's do the demo. So when we're looking at the demo and we're looking at, Nick, give me an example of how work can begin. Guess what? It's Salesforce. So for this example, I'm a rep and I'm trying to close a deal, right? If we log into our Salesforce as a rep and I'm submitting in this deal for approval, let's go ahead and get that started. I live here. I don't live in Pipefy. I know I just need to get this deal approved. I need to close Pipefy as a customer. How do I do that? So once we have it in approval stage from whatever way that we configure Salesforce, we go into Pipefy and we can see here the Pipefy UI, right? So what effectively is going to happen is we're going to have work start in from Salesforce and flow into Pipefy. But first, that rep just submitted that in for approval. I'm going to go in here and see that as that rep submitted in that deal desk for approval, one of the behaviors that we can easily implement is an email approval. Maybe his manager, VP, needs to see, hey, what are the high-level details that are coming from Salesforce from an email template? Of course, you can customize this. And this is actually a key call out. Most software today, as you all might know, have some sort of light agent or approval user license that we have to have within our organization. me as being this particular approver does not need to have a license for Pipefy. I live in email, maybe I'm on the fly doing other things in my day-to-day job, but I need to approve this request and call it I'm Ned, and Ned needs to approve this request. Maybe I hit approved because, hey, this looks good. I know Nick is trying to close this deal. Or if it's rejected, hey, I need more information. We can pop up a box here, request any information from Nick, and it goes back into the queue for Nick to actually respond back to. But let's be nice and approve this request. This email template, as well as the original email template, this form and the original email template can easily be customized. We'll go ahead and submit that form. Let's jump back into Pipefy. So if we go into the pipe in Pipefy, and I'll walk us through sort of the nuances and like the nomenclature of Pipefy itself, we saw that it came in the card, call it this card here, this Salesforce object, this deal, which is representative of these column cards in Pipefy, originally came into the first approval. Now, when I moved it and I hit yes, I approve this, let's close Pipefy, everything looks good. It automatically bumps it up to the second approval. And so now, if we're looking at all of the opportunities in flight from Deal Desk, some of the common mechanics of a card is these are the Salesforce fields that flow in from Salesforce into Pipefy for us to understand what it is that we're actually approving, right? And we'll come back to some of these as well. The general history of where it was, it started in first stage approval. Now, guess what? It's in second stage approval, sitting with the next VP, who is Lewis, on queue, on deck to approve this. Again, we can easily configure, change, edit these fields. We can move them, we can rearrange them on, call it the card, which is this white screen here, right? And almost like a book, our team uses this analogy. On the left side, we have information about the card. Well, what are you gonna do with it on the right side of the book? And that's what this is. So from here, we can easily approve or reject, but also we can actually see the audit log of who Ned, well, obviously approved it before, we were Ned. He approved it, and now it's going up to Lewis. And what's unique about this particular, call it Salesforce deal, is if I'm on your team and I want to encourage different behavior for approval, we can do the approval through email from the first stage, or we can actually do approvals in Slack. So what we've done, let's jump into Slack, is we can actually go in there and see that, hey, Lewis, who's part of this Slack channel group, actually needs to approve this particular opportunity. Here are those details. So if your team lives in Slack, that's totally fine. They can go ahead and approve that request in here, right? And you can assign, and this is, again, conversation of design, much like most of things Pipefy, but depending on who needs to be involved in a Slack channel, who maybe this is like a VP Slack channel for approval, that's super easy to set up in Slack. Again, we don't want to remove you from Slack if you live in there. So Lewis went ahead and approved this request. Let's go back. That automatically moved in now to say our CFO for approval. Quick call out and kind of pause here and take a beat. Any one of these fields is easily configurable. So we can go ahead and change the names of these phases or these stages simply by inline editing, right? We can easily determine, well, what is the design of, we call it a pipe or a workflow, which is what this is, a broad workflow from left to right, right? And we can easily change fields on the fly, which is going to be another constant theme in Pipefy. But again, once we approved it in Slack, that Pipefy deal moved to the CFO approval. Now let's pretend we have a very, very hands-on executive team, right? And they want to actually know more details and more context of what it is they're approving. And they can actually go in straight to the card itself or the opportunity itself in Pipefy, and they can approve it again or reject it. Very similar experience to Slack and email that we did before, right? And what we also try to do is, if we want to encourage, which we generally try to do, encourage collaboration that occurs internally within our organization. We have that same idea of internal collaboration as many other solutions on the market, but we try to make it so it's all appended to this particular card. So if we had, if I'm Nick and I'm communicating with my CFO, I can say, hey, I need this approved. You can have collaboration occurring within the card, and all of those comments are tied to this particular object in Pipefy or this card in Pipefy, and the list will get notified. So if we approve this request, right, we'll say it's approved. Alyssa hit the box, checked box, looks great, fantastic. Again, talk about audit log. We're not doing this in Slack. We're not we cannot audit an email, but all of those activities are checked and for reference shown here. And you can actually see the differences in fields as we fill them out, right? Which is very key and important for when we look at, well, what the heck happened in this deal? We can see that here, right? And now it's gone. So that Pipefy deal that we pushed in from Salesforce is now in the approved stage, right? Which is fantastic. Now, we talked about originally the idea that work comes in from Salesforce, goes through Pipefy for some business logic. In this case, we're sort of orchestrating the approval flow. But guess what? The end point, the destination of where we're going is actually Salesforce. And so if we actually go back to our Salesforce instance and we refresh this, it should move from approval to negotiation. And that field can be updated within your Salesforce instance, right? The rep has no idea this all happened. Like if your rep sent this in for approval, all he cares about is the fact that, hey, I just saw this got approved. Cool, on to closing this customer. Now let's move on, right? So now that we got that process completed and we hooked into Salesforce successfully, that will continue to happen in flight. Now what ends up happening is if we kind of transition a little bit to looking at a separate workflow, on the left, we have pipes, the idea that these are just simply, it's our word for workflows, pipes, Pipefy, right? Fairly clever. We can go through the contracting process pipe or the contracting process workflow. So, hey, we got this particular, no, just put it here. It's fine. We can go through this particular pipe and here's all the contracting deals that we would have. So if we're going to go through, say, a form-based experience, and we're going to go in there and say, hey, I want either these fields to come in through Salesforce, or we want to have a form for our internal employee business user to fill out. We can do that here and have a form embedded within Pipefy. We can also make this form public if you so desire. But if we have a form-based experience, it's very simple to make certain fields mandatory. But for example, let's go ahead and run through a scenario here that we're trying to purchase software from a procurement team. Again, in parallel, this could be the actual deal that we push through Salesforce. But for example's sake, we'll go through and fill out a form. Let's pick a business user, requested for, right? We'll choose an amount for how much this thing costs our organization. Fill out some fields here, give it a second. Again, all of this is easily configurable and editable on the fly. Right, recurring expense, easy stuff. Pick a supplier so we know who to send. Spoiler alert, the Docusign to, right? Now, contract. The contract to be signed. So if I'm a business user and I'm trying to either A, buy software, or if I'm a rep on the sales team and I'm trying to close a deal, I need to get a document signed, right? I need to get something redlined, something reviewed by InfoSec, by IT, by legal. So for example, we'll just tie in these sample documents. So we need this contract to be signed and reviewed, right? We can fill this stuff out, but we don't need to for today. We need IT security documentation reviewed as well. Let's tie that document into this request. I think we have everything filled out. Let's go ahead and create this new request, right? So the first stage, right? We have phases. We have FP&A that needs to approve this thing. It's going to go here to Itsec and legal approval. Fantastic. And let's send this thing out to Docusign when it's all ready and all complete, right? For example's sake, right? So Charlotte Young's now card or request is now sitting in FP&A approval. Again, maybe this team lives in Slack, and you can see here, Charlotte Young is approving. Here's a supplier that she's trying to purchase or the company she's trying to close as a deal, right? Just for an example, we know it's for the demo day. So, hey, we'll go ahead and approve that. Now that card moved from FP&A approval, of course, now into Itsec approval, right? So the interesting thing here that's going to happen is once that moves to Itsec approval, the way that we set this up is it should now create a ticket in Zendesk, right? So let's pause for a second and understand what just happened. This is now Zendesk. It's obviously not Pipefy. This could be any other help desk or customer support ticketing system that we have internally. But we want to trigger something to happen in the orchestration process where, hey, work came in from a form, right? Within this, we now have Zendesk as part of the workflow to send out work to, right? And we're moving ever so slightly and forward into Docusign, right? And so let's go back. Right, let's go actually back into Zendesk. So we saw this ticket was just created because we're in the Itsec approval phase in Pipefy. Again, yeah, you can totally customize the fields and the information that flows in. We know there's an IT contract for the IT security agents in Zendesk to review. Let's assume that they went ahead and reviewed it, and they'll type in and they'll attach the new V2 document from the original Itsec contract review here, and they can say approved by Itsec. Attached is the V2 doc, right? Let's submit this as solved, right? Ticket is closed. Let's go back into Pipefy because those IT security guys don't live here. But let's go into legal approval review, and we can see, hey, now that Charlotte Young card and request moved into the legal approval stage. And maybe legal also has their own Zendesk, their own ticketing system within Zendesk, right? Or within their organization, which is Zendesk. So if we go to legal approval, same thing, just like Itsec, we can set it up to a point where they need to actually approve and redline a document. Yes, this is its own process. And yes, this is being managed in Zendesk. And also, yes, thirdly, this could also be managed in Pipefy. For the sake of example, let's assume they're in Zendesk going ahead to redline a document, and there's that legal contract. We did our due diligence and we're saying, hey, approved by legal, attached to V2 doc, right? Let's actually make sure we have a doc to tie into this, right? We went through the redlining exercise, right? We went through the exercise of contacting legal, going through Zendesk, making the most of what Zendesk does best, which is tickets and ticket management, right? Here's that redline document, Nick, for you to close this deal. Let's go ahead and do the same thing, submit a solve, close out this ticket, right? Boom, solve ticket in Zendesk and moved card in Pipefy, right? And now it's actually sitting in the Docusign phase. So the way that we've set this up before I go any further is we had a form filled out in phase 1 for FP&A to approve. Those guys, they live in Slack. They approved it in Slack. For stage 2 and stage 3, Itsec and legal both live in Zendesk. So we set up the automation rule to be such as it creates a ticket in Zendesk, which I did quite often. And then now it's in the Docusign phase. So what does that mean? The way that we set this up, for example, in building on a workflow is, let's get out of this one. Let's go back. In my, let's see, email, we should have a Docusign that would automatically get sent out because we have red lines ready, sent out to the supplier, which would be Ernst & Young in this case, for example, right? We all know Docusign. Sample contract. I'm an Ernst & Young employee. Love it. Let's close this deal. They signed. Close that out. Standard Docusign behavior. If I work at Ernst & Young, I'll have a completed Docusign. But here's the thing: that completed Docusign will also, I'm going to speed this up for the sake of the demo and time, will also be in a couple minutes, so we don't have to wait. But in a couple minutes, will also be tied as the completed contract. That Docusigned, fully countersigned document will be assigned here automatically from Docusign. It'll automatically also move to signed, right? And then it will be moved to the done phase within Pipefy. So now that we have that Docusign completed, the exercise of actually getting a Docusign sent out is done, deal is done, and inevitably this can also move the stages for that rep in the Salesforce stage funnel to maybe commit or close because we have a signed contract. However, we decide to design that experience, right? Let's go back into Pipefy. Again, to why this is all relevant, well, guess what? We can actually audit all of the changes that were made onto this particular deal. We also have a history of all versions of that document tied to Pipefy. And it's like, hey, guys, I have a question about this particular deal. There's missing documentation, or hey, you just want to collaborate internally. Again, @mention your team, collaborate and get that done within the same card, within the same ticket, or I should say within the same card, right? Within Pipefy. High level information there. And quick time check, I know we have a few minutes and we're flying through this demo. But again, I want to keep coming back to this idea that as a matter of design within the organization, we as an organization need to determine where the heck is work coming from? What do we want to do with it? Are we having challenges with automation rules, approval flows within Pipefy? Where is it going? Like, are we sending it out to Docusign and then that updates Salesforce? Well, fantastic, we can certainly do that. So here's the other thing about Pipefy that I love that I want to really quickly showcase is the automations are easy to build. When we talk about low, no code, we really do mean it. All of the automations that we would have in today's demo session are listed here under this company. And within a company, your company here, you can have a multitude of business rules in flight, active and inactive. And for example, one of the easiest things I like to tell our customers to do is set up an SLA, right? If you determine, hey, what is an urgent SLA? Just edit it and just do it within the UI, determine its conditions. And what does urgent mean to you? Does it mean 12 hours? Does it mean 10? Does it mean 6? Does it mean 1 hour or 2 hours, right? Very simple to do. And you can save that here in Pipefy. Very simple. And to hook up Slack, we also have, again, part of those 500 integrations. Easily connect your Slack into there because FP&A loves Slack, right? And you can connect that into your organization as well. And lastly, really quick, email templates, super easy to build out. You'll find that in the top right. You'll spend a lot of your time configuring new things within Pipefy. You can easily configure new templates to be created for what types of emails get sent out, right? And that puts us, boom, right at time. And I will open it up for questions. Again, high-level run-through of Pipefy, specifically a high-level run-through of scenarios that we typically run into for finance, procurement, sales ops, and customer ops. Questions? Happy to help. And again, if you have anything specific you wanted to follow up on, or if you see any commonalities with approval management or managing the contract process or understanding an audit of what has happened within a particular pipe or a particular workflow within our organization, I should say, happy to do so. And another theme of Pipefy too, if no one has any questions, we try to give you a leg up initially and at the start of Pipefy. So what we typically see as being beneficial for customers is, have you done any templatized work for us already? And what can we use as part of the ideation phase of building out a workflow? That can easily be done as well within the template gallery here, depending on your particular department. So quick question here, levels for approvals. Can you build rules based on the size of the deal to skip CFO or too low, or go to CFO if over a certain amount? And absolutely, Sarah, that's a great question. Yes, you can. So that is part of those conditional automations that we build out. As far as, let's go back into that approval pipe. That's all within there, lives in automations. So define an automation, define a criteria. For example, if it's over a certain amount or under a certain amount, we don't need to bother the CFO with that deal if it's a small opportunity, right? Or if it's a large strategic opportunity, maybe there's more complexity and nuance to the approval flow that we would have. Good question. And again, I'll leave this here because again, I think it's a great slide to begin, reference back to, and end on. But it's what, as far as workflow design, what are we struggling with and how can we help? And Pipefy can help determine which workflows make the most sense for your organization. So I think there's a poll that was just sent out. Feel free to answer yes or no, follow up with questions. Happy to run you through personally a demo of Pipefy. Again, this is a very high level session. We did a lot, I would say in 28 minutes. Happy to help. And with that, I think we're right at time for your next meeting, everybody. Thank you so much. Any follow-up questions, feel free to share with my team.